Hi guys! So this week we are, of course, talking about evidence in our assignment 2 papers. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and dive right in. My paper again is on the still image Sky Vodka ad, which I have posted and discussed before. The last time was in last week's blog. And so if you'd like whoever is watching this to look at the still image while you're watching to or listening to this video, you can check it out in last week's blog, or if you just Google Sky Vodka ad, it's usually the first or second image. It's the one of a man in a suit whose head you don't see standing over a model in a bikini. And so diving right into the first question, how did my underlining and highlighting go? It went pretty well. I made quite a few claims, which I knew I would, taking a very strong stance against this photograph. I believe personally that the photograph is wrong, specifically that it is sexist and misogynistic, especially for being released in the 2000s, and I discussed that in hopefully a slightly professional manner in my paper. The draft I'll be discussing, I should mention this, is I've already, of course, had my video conference with Professor Nelson. I've made some changes to my draft since the video conference. So since my emailing with a fellow student and since the video conference, I've made some changes, but I won't be discussing my final draft today. Why is that? Because in this video I'll be discussing some things that I still have yet to change in my paper. So again, I have made several claims. Most of them are that the photograph is wrong for portraying women in such a light, and it wasn't difficult for me to find these claims because I knew from the beginning, before I even wrote my very first draft, that I was going to have a negative response towards this image, that I was going to discuss it as being sexist and as the image not having any pros, only cons. I mean, it's even selling vodka, which is bad for you. It's, liquor is, they've proven it does no good for you. And so there's really no pro to this ad whatsoever. And so the evidence that I already have in the draft I'm discussing in this video is, there's tons of it. I guess I can start at the beginning of my paper and work my way down, which actually is good because first I'm supposed to discuss the statements that are supported well, because we're discussing evidence. Now, the ones I think are supported well are the statements that happen earliest in my paper. These, of course, are going to be the opening paragraph, the mostly the soaps are the best claims I've made because I've spent the most time on them. They're the paragraphs. I used to have one paragraph, and then after my conference with Professor Nelson, I split my what into, I believe, 3 paragraphs. Because I've spent the most time with them, they're my most researched section of the paper. This isn't a great thing. This happens on a lot of papers we write, where we write the first pages and then those get the most attention and the best evidence, because later when we write the later pages up until the last page, followed by the works cited page, we, during that process, continue to revise our first pages. I've been continually revising my opening paragraph ever since I've written it, which was after my video conference with Professor Nelson. So it's the beginning of my paper that's the strongest right now. Just to give you a few examples of what I'm talking about, I talk about the company, Sky Vodka, and I talk about, a little bit further in the paper, I discuss a lot about body language, and colors are my big portions because it is a still image. There are 2 humans in it, and it's a lot of the same color, which is blue. And so I discuss the color blue, what that means, and that evidence is supported well only in that I'm completely certain that I'm right, that the use of blue is meant to be a calming effect. I did not mean to wear blue for this, by the way. And that reds and oranges and yellows were not used for the purpose of calming the viewer down and making them feel sedated and serene. Just to give you one example, another example is body language, which I get into in the beginning and then a little bit later in the paper when I start discussing actually why it's sexist, as opposed to just the colors and the weather and the models. When I discuss why it's sexist, I discuss a little bit more on body language, how the man's knees are locked, and how this signifies a dominating pose, especially him standing over the woman with her between his legs. So some sections that need more revision again appear later in my paper. Now these are the ones, the biggest one that I still need to research is not so much the race issue, because I'm not focusing on that as much, and so my evidence for the race issue does not need to be as strong as my evidence that this photo is sexist. Any intellectual will look at this photograph and tell you that it is sexist. Anyone will. It's very blatant. It's not subtle. However, my job isn't just to go, it's obvious, the end. My job is to point out all of the reasons why it is misogynistic in any lens. And so finding more examples of that, finding more evidence, couldn't hurt. What I have yet to do is go through the textbook and pick out examples from there. If you'll remember, several of my previous posts, the examples we had to choose from the textbook, where we were allowed to choose from, say, 10 to 15 chapters, I would often choose ones about sexism. I discussed midriffs, I discussed Gloria Steinem. Any of those would provide great quotes for the later section. I'm referring to the why section, the section that discusses why the photo is wrong, not just what is in the photo. So even though I know I'm right in writing about this, I still need to find more evidence to back that up. And so, again, what might I be able to use from the textbook is the last question. The answer to that is a little bit more specific of an example revolving around this photograph. If I were to pull an example from, a cigarette commercial from the 1980s, it wouldn't be quite the same as a vodka commercial from the 2000s. And so my job is to find a little bit more specific references to this still ad, which again you can find just by Googling Sky Vodka ad if you need to look at it. Also, the topic of the everyman and why this is directed at male audiences. Again, you would think that because there's one man and one female, and it's for vodka, that it would be directed towards all males and females above the age of 21. Clearly, it is not. And so the final thing I need to research more is proof that this is directed at adolescent males, which I can guarantee you it is. It's just there's no proof of that when looking at the ad. You need to find proof from a different source. So that is something else I've yet to do. I also am struggling with making my paper the 6 pages, and so this is going to be a great way for me to get it from the 5 pages it's at now to 6. And that is about everything as far as my paper is concerned. I tried not to ramble too much in this video. But again, the highlighting went well, especially earlier in the paper. What I did is I turned all of my statements in my Times New Roman 12-point font. I highlighted them and changed the font color from black to blue. And then scrolling through it, I had a lot of blue sentences. So hopefully others of you experienced the same thing where you found yourself highlighting a lot. Not just, one sentence every page, but multiple sentences. And then I'm, again, letting some of the sentences speak for themselves, and others I need to research more, specifically in the why section. Okay, I'm rambling. Anyways, congrats on all of us finishing our papers this week and turning them in on Monday. And I look forward to watching your videos because I'm interested to follow up with you guys whose stories I've been following regarding your ads, which are all really good. So, alright guys, bye.